Is Garrett Wilson still a wide receiver one? Is Kenneth Gainwell the number one pickup in fantasy this week? Or should you go get Joshua Kelly? What's going on with that Austin Eckler ankle injury? We're going to dive into all of it right now on the ADP, the Average Dudes podcast. I am your Average Dude host, Matt Mormann, and this is going to be primarily a waiver wire show, going through those pickups, those ads on players to go scoop up after week one. And it's important to remember after week one, there will always be some fool's gold out there, but there will also be a couple of gems who can make a massive impact for you for the entire season. So we're going to go through those real quick. Let's touch on that Monday Night Football game. And look, the big story of it coming out is obviously the Aaron Rodgers injury. As of this recording, I have not seen anything official yet as far as what it is. The Achilles injury, though, is what's feared. And it sounds like that's what it's going to be, and that will rule him out for the rest of the season, which means Zach Wilson would be the quarterback for the New York Jets once again. And that's bad news. It's bad news for everybody involved. I guess unless you're Garrett Wilson, or unless you're Zach Wilson. If you're Garrett Wilson, that's definitely bad news. He was kind of everybody's favorite breakout wide receiver for this year. And I don't even think he needed MVP Aaron Rodgers, right? He just needed competent quarterback play, which I think is why I still have a little bit of hope on him being able to be that wide receiver one. I don't think you can rank it that way. I think you kind of have to rank him. I was looking at my pre-draft rankings, just kind of seeing where I would slot him at now. And pretty much where I had Calvin Ridley, that's where I would now land on Garrett Wilson, around like wide receiver 16 or so. I think the Garrett Wilson ceiling has definitely gone down, right? Like, I thought there was a legit chance he could be the wide receiver one overall. I thought he could be challenging Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, those guys. I don't think that's there anymore. I do still think he can find his way into mid-range number wide receiver one, though, like that wide receiver 5, 6, 7 range. Think about kind of like a CD Lamb kind of guy. I think he can kind of land in that range as long as Zach Wilson's just competent. And last night, he looked more like Zach Wilson than he did Aaron Rodgers. And I think that's fair to expect that. But I don't know. Maybe, he came in, after just one, 4 plays, one drive for Rodgers. He wasn't practicing with the ones. There's all those kind of factors that go into that for Zach Wilson. And he probably doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt. But maybe I'm just going to blindly optimistically give him that benefit of the doubt. I think if you can trade for Garrett Wilson, I would still rather have him than like a Drake London, DK Metcalf, a Deebo Samuel. I'll take Garrett Wilson over all those guys. So if you can trade one of those guys and get Garrett, I would do it. Mike Williams, Tyler Lockett, all those kinds of guys. I would make that swap. So there's still hope for Garrett Wilson. He did have a touchdown last night, but only 5 targets and 34 yards is not what you want to see. The good news coming out of New York last night was definitely Breece Hall. 10 carries, 127 yards. He broke off an 83-yard run. And just to see him getting almost the same amount of carries as Dalvin Cook in week one, and to see him do a lot with it is incredibly encouraging. The one team where I do have Breece, I benched him for Isaiah Pacheco in week one because I was just very nervous on what it was going to look like in week one. Obviously, I should have played Breece Hall, but you know what? Sometimes you got to take that lump to to see how things are going to shake out. And I will be playing Breece Hall this week moving forward. I think this launches him straight into the RB2 conversation. So that's exciting. On the Bills side of the ball, Josh Allen looked terrible out there. 3 interceptions. He just doesn't seem to have that deep ball at the moment. And so that really kills the Gabe Davis sleeper appeal. Stephon Diggs, PPR monster, 10 catches, got 102 yards and a touchdown out of it. But, if Josh Allen doesn't have that signature deep ball, then you really have to wonder about the rest of these weapons. Dalton Kincaid did have 4 catches for 26 yards. Dawson Knox had 3 catches for 25 yards. He sure would like to roll both those into one player. But I'm afraid this is what it's going to be all season with those two. Is going to be kind of just both of them get 4 targets, and hopefully one of them catches a touchdown. But you're not going to know which one until it happens. Deontay Hardy was involved a lot early and then just that stopped. So he had 3 catches for only 9 yards, but they all came on, I think, the first drive, maybe the second drive. Outside of that, not a whole lot to talk about with the Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets on this one. The Jets defense did look every bit as good as we all kind of thought they would. They were awesome out there. Like I said, those 3 interceptions on Zach Wilson. They also got 5 sacks on on Josh Allen. They got 3 picks, 5 sacks. They looked great. So they look like one of the top defensive units. And that won't change, even with the Aaron Rodgers injury. That can still definitely be the case. All right, so waiver wire time. We're going to go position by position here, and we're just going to kind of quickly hit on a handful of names at each spot. Guys to prioritize. I'll say at the top, don't spend – if you've played a fab league, a league where you bid on the players, don't blow your budget week 1. There's only probably 3-4 players on this list that I would really go target and really try hard to get. And even then, I think I'd probably only spend about $10 if I'm in a $100 league. Maybe I would go creep up to like 15 on the top running backs, especially if I lost J.K. Dobbins. But let's start with quarterback. We're going to go quarterback first here. Brock Purdy is my number 1 quarterback to go pick up off the waiver wire. He was QB 10 last week. He is at the LA Rams this week. And look, the Rams played well against Geno. I'm just not buying it. And I think Purdy can be this low-end QB 10 level starter for you. I think that there's nothing in the offense of San Francisco that suggests otherwise, right? There's probably going to be those weeks where he only throws 1 touchdown and McCaffrey runs in a second one, or maybe Debo gets another handoff and gets one in. But I think that QB 10 to QB 15 can be where he lives. That's a stream starter, So if your quarterback, I haven't looked at the full week 2 slate yet, but if your quarterback has a tough matchup, thinking about, like Stafford versus 49ers, right? The flip side of this matchup here, then he can be a guy that you go ahead and plug in. Just kind of looking around here at the week 2 schedule, just kind of see off the top of my head who are some guys maybe you want to take out of your lineup to replace Purdy with. Who has Cleveland? Pittsburgh. Well, you're not playing Kenny Pickett anyway. So you hopefully don't have to stream quarterbacks this early on, but if you do, that's definitely an option for you. My second quarterback pickup for the week would be Jordan Love. And this one I think is almost more of a higher upside play. He was QB3 last week, threw 3 touchdowns without Christian Watson. And look, we said all offseason, we don't know what Jordan Love is. And that could mean he's awesome. We didn't know. And so if he is this good, man, that's going to make a huge difference going for the rest of the season. He can be your guy for the year. My third quarterback to pick up is Jared Goff. He's a bit more owned in leagues. He's probably less likely to be available. But look, Matthew Stafford just threw for over 330 yards against the Seattle Seahawks. Jared Goff was QB 18 last week against the Chiefs, but I totally believe that he has the weapons and the ability to capitalize on that matchup. Transitioning over to running backs now. Kenny Gainwell of the Philadelphia Eagles. Kenneth Gainwell. Look, he was the lead back last week. He had 14 carries for 54 yards. DeAndre Swift only had 1 run. Boston Scott only had 1 run. Rashad Penny was a DNP out there. He was inactive. So this could be a legitimate bell cow RB1 sitting out there on a lot of waiver wires. I looked this morning, I think he's only owned in 21% of ESPN leagues. Go get Kenny Gainwell. Use that top waiver priority. Spend, like I said, $15. If you lost J.K. Dobbins, man, I would not be afraid to even go up to like 20 on Kenneth Gainwell here because, when you lose a guy like J.K. Dobbins, you got to get a little lucky sometimes finding that replacement. And there's a chance that's sitting right here in your lap. And so Minnesota, they did hold Rashad White pretty well last week. But with that workload on that offense for Gainwell, I'm very excited about what he could be. Miles Sanders last year was a low-end RB1, high-end RB2 option pretty much every week. And, yeah, he's going to have some weeks where Jalen Hurts steals the touchdowns on him, and that's going to be frustrating. And Gainwell does, he does project as more of a pass-catching running back on an offense where they don't throw the ball to running backs. But if he's getting 14 carries a week, he can absolutely be in your lineup as that RB2 option. Joshua Kelly is my RB2 to pick up this week. He is at Tennessee this week. Austin Eckler is dealing with an ankle injury. Joshua Kelly saw 16 carries for 91 yards and a touchdown in week 1 in that matchup against the Miami Dolphins. If again, I feel like the Chargers for years have been looking for a second option. And at one time they tried it with Joshua Kelly, right? And it didn't work out then. But if he's going to be that number 2 to Austin Eckler, they're actually going to use him as the number 2 in kind of more of a split. That could be immensely valuable. Eckler with his ankle injury also. I don't know how serious it is, but running backs, they get nicked up. Things can get worse, obviously. So an RB for the Los Angeles Chargers would be very valuable if he gets a significant workload. Kyren Williams on the other side of the Los Angeles with the Rams. He does have the 49ers this week, and that puts a bit of a damper on this one. But he was the RB7 last week with 15 carries for 52 yards and 2 touchdowns. Almost more importantly to me was the fact that Cam Akers only ran for 29 yards on 22 carries. He barely got to move the ball at all. And we have seen Cam Akers really fall out of favor with his coaching staff before. It would not surprise me to see that happen again. And Kyren Williams kind of become the guy. I almost hope that this week Akers does get more work than Williams again. A 22 carry to a 15 carry split again would be great, because then he can really struggle with that 49ers defense, right? Cam Akers could be terrible. And then maybe next week they pivot over to Roschon Johnson. I'm sorry, not to Roschon Johnson, Kyren Williams. But guess what? Next up, we're talking about Roschon Johnson. And this one might be more of a long-term play, right? He was very involved in the passing game, which was surprising, I think, to see Justin Fields dump it off that much. He had 7 targets and 6 catches for 35 yards. They are at Tampa Bay this week. I don't know how much Roschon Johnson matters this week. This one might be a bit more of a long-term play, but I think anytime a rookie does show you something in the week 1, it's worthwhile taking notice. Justice Hill or Gus Edwards, one of them is probably going to be a decent pickup with J.K. Dobbins' injury. I think I have turned back towards Gus at this point. They did elevate Melvin Gordon from the practice squad. I don't know. Justice Hill had both the goal line touchdowns last week. He was getting all that short yardage work. Gus has always been the guy they've turned to, though. And Gus has never done anything wrong to make them go away from him. So maybe it is Gus again. I think, look, spend $1, pick your guy. And literally you can just flip a coin. Hopefully it's not Melvin Gordon. That would be just a train wreck for everybody involved. So I think I would spend my $1 on Gus, but I don't mind spending my $1 on Justice Hill also. Don't play either of them this week at Cincinnati. I'm kind of expecting the Bengals to really light the scoreboard. The Ravens secondary is all sorts of banged up now, which, by the way, go buy low on all of those Bengals. I talked about that on Monday morning, with T. Higgins in particular. I got a feeling this one could get ugly, which could mean Justice Hill gets some more opportunities in the passing game then. Lastly, on the running back standpoint, stash Tyjae Spears of the Tennessee Titans. He played 54% of the snaps last week. He did see 4 targets. Not a lot of run for Tyjae Spears, but he does appear to be the true handcuff for Derrick Henry. They've got the Chargers this week. You're not using Tyjae Spears this week, but, he could be a guy to hold on to in case of a Derrick Henry injury. On to wide receivers. Romeo Doubs. He should be owned in most leagues already, but in case he's not, go check out there for him. He is at Atlanta this week. He was wide receiver 10 last week. And look, as long as Christian Watson's out, he'll probably be the target leader on this team. Had a very nice week 1. Like I said, he's wide receiver 10 on the week, and he could be a flex option for you. Puka Nacua, he had 15 targets and 10 catches, 119 yards last week. I'm definitely buying him over Tutu Atwell in this offense. They're against San Francisco this week, so it might be a little bit ugly in week 2. And Cooper Kupp will be back eventually. But this is something that me and Tanner talked about in the preseason. When a young player shows you something in weeks 1, 2, 3, I'm more likely to buy into that than I am a veteran, right? We're going to talk about Kendrick Bourne here in a little bit. I'm much more likely to buy into Puka Nacua or Romeo Doubs, or, by the way, the next name on this list, Rashid Shaheed, than I am Kendrick Bourne. those young players, they're the ones who are actually improving and getting better, not just maybe getting like a 1 week opportunity spike. Puka Nacua, he was a sleeper for a lot of people. A lot of people liked him in the NFL draft. He went, I believe it was around 5, but he's got a great opportunity here for his first 4 weeks. And if he can establish himself in the offense, maybe he can be something even afterwards when Cooper Kupp does return. My third wide receiver to pick up, Rashid Shaheed. He is at Carolina this week. He was wide receiver 11 last week. He had 6 targets, 5 catches, 89 yards, and a touchdown against the Titans for the Saints. And again, I don't have a whole lot to say on this one, but I think it's just a guy that you can flex in a pinch on this one, especially in a deeper league, more of a bench hold. A couple other names just to kind of throw at you here. Zay Jones, he was the wide receiver 18 last week. He played more snaps than both Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk, and he was much more involved in the offense than Christian Kirk for sure. Kendrick Bourne, he was wide receiver 4 last week. I'm not buying it. Mac Jones threw the ball 50 times. That's not going to happen, but they do have a matchup this week with the Miami Dolphins. They'll probably have to throw a lot, but again, I'm not buying into Kendrick Bourne. Nico Collins did have 11 targets with the Texans last week. He's got the Colts this week, so that could be a guy to, again, a desperation play. But if you do need that, he is. And lastly, among wide receivers, don't forget about Rashee Rice. He had that nice game on Thursday night. He had that touchdown. I'm willing to stash him. If you've got a league with enough bench spots and enough depth to it, I think he could be a second half guy for you. Let's move on here to the tight ends. Zach Ertz, we're talking about him in 2023. He had 10 targets last week. Look, it wasn't pretty, but any player getting 10 targets is worthwhile looking at. And it's tight end. How was your tight end last week? I know mine wasn't very good. I believe in non-PPR, there were only 2 tight ends that scored double-digit points last week. And look, Zach Ertz wasn't one of them. He's more of a PPR play for sure. But tight end smells. And so if a guy gets 10 targets, you kind of have to give him at least a side eye, at least a look, right? Logan Thomas, he had 8 targets. And by the way, also with Zach Ertz, he faces the Giants this week. So pretty juicy opportunity and a good matchup there. I should definitely have mentioned that. Zach Ertz, to me, for sure, the tier 1 of the tight end streamers this week. Secondly, though, is Logan Thomas. He had 8 targets last week. Again, this is just a streaming option. He's got Denver this week. And then Juwan Johnson, he's got Carolina. Played 75% of the snaps last week. Had 5 targets, 3 catches, 36 yards. I'm not enthused by our tight end options this week. I really wish Isaiah Likely would have been awesome because then I could have a guy to actually recommend to everybody. But alas, here we are. Lastly, some defense streamers for you. And I'm going to give you a few here that you can use for 2 weeks because I think that's kind of the way you look at defenses are 1 or 2 weeks. I don't have any long-term defensive plays for you that you can just set for your lineup for the rest of the season. But the Cleveland Browns, they were awesome against Burrow and the Bengals last week. And they've got Pittsburgh this week and Tennessee next week. So Cleveland Browns are definitely my number 1 defense to go get. Those are 2 juicy matchups coming up. Green Bay, they are at Atlanta. Then they've got New Orleans. Detroit looked good against Kansas City. They've got a Seattle offense this week who really struggled against the Rams. Then they face Atlanta. And then my last 2 are kind of 1-week plays with the Denver Broncos. They face the Washington Commanders. And then the New York Giants, even though they look terrible against the Dallas Cowboys, they're at Arizona this week. And I think any defense going up against Arizona is worthwhile to play on your fantasy team. So that'll do it for me here this morning. Good luck on the waiver wire this week, guys. And we will be back for you throughout the week with some starts and sits and some other good stuff for you. Hopefully you won that week 1 matchup. Hopefully you're 1-0. But if you lost, if you're earlier on that waiver order, go grab these guys. Turn that season around. Keep following us at ADP Dudes on Twitter, at Real Matt Mormann, and keep an eye on me at Tanner Ward 7 to hang out with Tanner Ward. And be sure to keep on following, like, and subscribe that podcast. Follow it on YouTube. Hey, if you don't want to listen to these full episodes, I post some YouTube shorts out there. So, those are only 60 seconds a pop, and you can get some good, quick information that way. And we will see you guys throughout the week.